Hey everybody, it's Chainsaw Reacts back once again with another video for you guys. Today, guys, I'm reviewing Batman The Long Halloween Part 2. Don't worry, no spoilers, don't worry. Before I jump into my thoughts about this film, here's the synopsis. Batman pursues a serial killer with the assistance of police officer James Gordon and attorney Harvey Dent. But when the killer takes on the criminal family of the Falcones, Harvey Dent gets caught between the fronts. To get right to the point, I enjoyed this film. I really did. Now, I mentioned this in my Long Halloween Part 1 review, and I'll repeat it here again. I didn't approach watching this film as, okay, how well did they adapt the Long Halloween storyline from the comics? Like, did they adapt it well? Were the changes made sense? Some of that was in there, but my main goal was just to watch Part 1 and now Part 2 as seeing how they just told a story. Was it coming across well? Were the dramatic moments hitting? Were some of the action really working? All that kind of stuff. And then, of course, some of it was, of course, how they adapted the storyline and all that kind of stuff and the changes they made. I think overall, they did a pretty damn good job across the board, in my opinion. I might sound like a broken record, but just like with Part 1 of this story, Part 2 looks so good. The artwork, oh my gosh. I love the shots they decided to go with in this film. And there were so many great moments. I'm like, this visually looks amazing. And the story they're telling, it matches. The tone, it matches. The more and more I see this art style, the more I'm falling in love with it. And I think it really works for this story and for Batman in the world of Gotham. It just looks beautiful. I just can't say enough about it. It looks so damn good in my opinion. As the film was going on, I started to notice something, and I don't have an issue with it. This feels more like a Harvey Dent Two-Face film than a Batman film. Now, don't get me wrong. This is still focused on Batman in terms of him being the center of the story and everything like that. But there was a lot of focus and a lot of screen time on Harvey Dent and his turn into Two-Face. And like I said, I don't have an issue with it because it kind of made sense the way the Long Halloween Part 1 it kind of establishes and sets up this version of Harvey Dent. I think that's why it didn't feel weird is because of how much screen time he got within Part 1 of the story. I should have mentioned this earlier in the review because people are going to be asking, should you watch Batman The Long Halloween Part 1 right before you watch Part 2? In my opinion, I don't think you have to. Now, you do have to know some of the things that they establish and what has happened in Part 1 in order for you to really comprehend and understand and to, in my opinion, enjoy Part 2. But I don't think you have to watch Part 1 right before you watch Part 2. I feel like if you remember some of the things that happened in that movie or if you remember it verbatim, you don't have to. But you may find it as a better experience if you watch Part 1 and then Part 2 right after to get the full context of the story. And just the way the story was told, it makes sense that they split this into two films. After seeing Part 2, it makes more sense. But in my opinion, I don't think you have to watch Part 1 right before you start Part 2 for the first time. I don't think you have to rewatch that film. But maybe if you feel it would give you a better context and a better sense of the story and the scope of what they were trying to tell, then maybe you watch Part 1 and Part 2. But in my opinion, I don't think you have to, but maybe it'll be better for your experience. Who knows? Batman The Long Halloween Part 2 establishes some more characters within Gotham. The two most notable ones, in my opinion, are Poison Ivy and Scarecrow. They handled them pretty damn well. I'm not going to get into too specifics of their involvement in this film in case you kind of want to be surprised by that. But I will say this. The opening scene in this film was so interesting, and it threw me off for a bit. I'm like, okay, this is an interesting opening here. And then as it continues on, you start to understand, oh, this is what they're doing. Like, they do not wait. They jump right into the story, and I think it's a really interesting way to start into the story with the opening scene. I think it was a pretty damn good way to start off this film. Just like with Batman The Long Halloween Part 1, Part 2 had some great voice acting from everybody. I really felt their emotion. I really felt their characters coming through with their voices, and I really appreciated that. I think it really enhanced the film, because sometimes with animated projects, the voice can make or break it, in my opinion. The animation, whatever style they go with, can look great and everything, and in this case, like I said, it looks great. But if some voice actors are not really hitting the mark, or if they're not really conveying the character well and you're not really believing it, and it's kind of taking you out of the film or whatever, or the TV show, in this case, film, it can kind of hurt it. But in my opinion, I think everybody did a great job, and I really like these actors for these characters, so please keep them on, continue, because they're clearly setting up more stuff here. I mean, come on. I really enjoyed the voice work here. It was great. Another thing I should have mentioned in my review earlier, but I was talking about other things. I wanted to get to other things. Batman The Long Halloween Part 2 is rated R. Now, Long Halloween Part 1 was PG-13. And when I learned about that R, when I was watching the film, I was trying to find what exactly made this R versus the PG-13 Part 1? Why was Part 2 rated R? And there was a couple of things I saw where I'm like, I can kind of see it. I think they could have gotten away with still rating this PG-13, but I guess some of the visuals and things, and there's a certain thing that happens in the film that, okay, I can kind of see why this is rated R, but I feel like they could have made this PG-13, but still, really enjoyed it. In thinking of critiques for this film, there's only one thing I was really noticing, but as the film was continuing on, I started to notice more. It's not so much that it's slowing down, because there were some slow moments I kind of wish they would have picked up a little bit more, but it was all due to the pacing. Because there's certain moments that need to be high intensity. And other things, it's important to have this moment, even if it's a slower moment, because it's developing character. It's developing something that's going to happen later that's important. So for me, I'm not saying this is a perfect film, but I think that it's not so much the slowdown moments are boring. It's just that the slowdown moments are important, but sometimes they're not important as you might think, but they may be important later. So it kind of makes sense to slow things down. But I felt that this film was great in terms of giving you a lot of story and getting to some high intensity moments, in between small little breaks here and there. But I felt like they did a pretty good job with that. So nothing really stood out as oh, I don't like that at all. I feel like everything they were doing in this film was pretty solid or good or great. So I really have no real critiques per se for this film. And I kept thinking, like, is there something that I didn't really like? And there wasn't really anything that I was like, not so much. There's things I liked definitely better than others, but I felt like they did a great job here. And so, yeah, that's just my honest opinion on it. In conclusion, Batman The Long Halloween Part 2 is a great way to close out this story. And after you see Part 1 and then you see Part 2, it makes sense why they split this film. Could they have made Batman The Long Halloween into a 2.5-hour animated film? Yeah, okay, it would have worked. Could they have made this in an hour, 15 minutes, an hour and 20? Yeah, but they would have to rush through a lot of stuff, and I feel like it would hurt them. It would actually come across as, wow, they really rushed the storyline, and this is not good. So I'm glad they split it into 2. And the way I see it is Part 1 has some setup and has some payoff, but Part 2 really is the one that just throws everything at you, because they had all of that build up in part 1, but there was still some payoff in Part 1. It wasn't like Part 1 was all set up and everything. Like, it all just made sense. And I felt like Part 2 really delivered on that. So if you haven't seen Part 2, I highly recommend checking out. Of course, if you haven't seen Part 1, you need to go watch Batman The Long Halloween Part 1 first, then watch Part 2. If you have seen Part 2, I'm curious to know your thoughts, guys. After seeing both films, did you like both films? Which one did you like more? Did you like Part 2 more, Part 1 more? Whatever thoughts you have, positive or negative for this film, let me know in the comment section below, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed the review. I will talk to you guys soon. Peace out.